I want to talk today a little bit about spam and scams and how to identify those types of inquiries that might come through your website, whether it's directly to an email inbox from your contact page or whether it's through a contact us form. It's very important to understand the difference between legitimate customer inquiries, legitimate threats or concerns, and spam or scam type offers or threats. I get far too many inquiries from my own clients asking questions like, hey, is this something I need to worry about? Is this legitimate? Is this a concern? And because these threats are often designed to provoke emotion and make you concerned, but they're fairly easy to identify. And I'm going to point out a few key tips that will help you identify whether a particular message that you get is legitimate or not. The first thing I want to comment here, this particular example that I'm going to use is one that has just come through in the last week. And the message basically says, hi there, my name is Tara. Your website or a website your organization hosts is infringing on a copyright protected images owned by myself. It is a threat-based scam. There's something on your website that is copyrighted. I'm going to sue your ass unless you remedy it in some way. And then they're asking you to give you a link on how to remedy it, which we'll talk about in a second. So that is the nature and the content of this particular message. Now, how do you tell whether this is legitimate or not? Well, first of all, I'm hopeful that you have worked with a website developer such as my company Signal, which you can trust to not use copyright infringing materials. They've used legitimate stock photography sources or free ones such as Unsplash or Pixabay, or they've taken their own photographs, they've done their own video editing work, they've written their own content. If you're working with a legitimate web developer, that is not going to be a concern to begin with. So you would immediately throw it out on the grounds of, you guys are idiots, this would never happen. Even if you're not certain, there are some pretty easy ways to tell that this message is not a legitimate one. Number one, this message came through a web form. Web forms on a website generally have a name, an email, perhaps a phone number field, and then what question do you have, or what notes, or what do you want to ask us? And the space for entering content in those fields is relatively small. It is not designed for writing a novel. So the moment you receive an inquiry through one of those web forms that has a huge amount of text, like this, be suspicious. It does not automatically make it illegitimate, but you should raise an eyebrow or two because it is quite atypical. It would be uncomfortable for someone to type and edit that much text in that tiny little space. It is far more likely that someone simply copied and pasted it into your form. And I want to make a note here that people do this manually quite often from third world countries. They hire very cheap labor who just go to websites and submit and submit and submit and submit and submit. So it doesn't matter whether you have a reCAPTCHA or any sort of spam detector or robot detector. These are often people, and even those anti-robot detectors aren't foolproof. So it's quite unfortunate, but the reality is no matter how much care you take, you are going to get some of these messages anyway. So rule one, if it's incredibly long and it came through a web submission form, that's a little bit suspicious. If it came through an email directly, then it could be, that's more likely someone's going to spend a little bit more time writing something, but they're at least going to format it with line breaks and links and a signature at the bottom, right? So look at it and ask the question is this copy and pasted content? Does it look like copy and pasted content? The next big indication of copy and pasted content is how generic is it? In this case, there is actually a mention of my client's website, but only once, only here. That's the only part of this entire message that mentions anything about their company name, the page of the content, which website they're talking about, anything like that, right? You can see it's also written in a very generic way. Your website or a website that your organization hosts, they don't seem to know which, is infringing on a copyright protected images owned by myself. Okay. Which brings us to rule 3. If you see really poor English, bad grammar, terrible spelling, if it doesn't quite make sense, chances are you're dealing with someone who English is not their first language. Again, that does not mean it is not legitimate by itself, but again, raise the other eyebrow, because this is looking more and more suspicious as we go. Less and less specific to your company, more and more like a scam. But here is perhaps the biggest and the most important one for you to notice and for you to be aware of and careful about, is that what this scammer is asking you to do is to check out the content that is infringing by see proof of my copyrights by downloading this tool here. Click this link, download and install this tool to your computer, and we will show you the offending content that you need to remedy and remove from your website. Otherwise, we're going to give you damages of up to $130,000. I'm going to assume that's US dollars. Don't know. You see my point here. The moment someone gives you a link, be very cautious about clicking that link. Make certain that you trust this entity before you click that link, because there is always a chance that it could install some malicious JavaScript and so on your website, on your PC. Even a standard web link has some potential risk to cause problems on your PC. In this case, they're asking you to download and install something way more risky. Never ever do that with someone that you do not fully trust. So that is the biggest consideration here. The moment you see them directing you to download and install something, you know that they are most likely trying to gain access to your computer and to your network, with which they can wreak all kinds of damage to you and to your company. Now it happens, if you want further evidence, you should see my other clients' websites, or this client in particular has received this same message from Devin, and then the same message again from Shannon, and they're all exactly the same, and more as well. And this is exactly the type of behavior you'll see from this sort of net-based attack, where they'll basically just hit everybody they possibly can. And some people, unfortunately, will take the bait, install the software, become vulnerable to attackers, and then have a big mess to clean up afterwards. Don't be that guy. I hope this has given you some perspective on how to identify spam and scam. Look out for those particular attributes of messages that you get. If you do have questions, and it's a website that I have built, if you're one of my clients, you absolutely can contact me, and I'll help you verify what you're looking at. But I highly encourage you to get familiar with this type of message and just simply learn to identify the ones that you should bin by yourself.